You want to do like a custom like that? Don't show up there.
Step, round the blue step. Bring the big blue step, folks.
Okay, you can sit here. Yeah. This is one. Yeah, you can see it. You can see it. Yeah. So they gotta come a car, but you want it? I get kind of. Just do one side. Just do one side. Okay, you okay? You okay? Yeah.
จอดอะไรแต่ข้างดูไปได้ก็เลย
Ở đây cái mỏ cái này.
cái đá thôi
Before you ask that, I was going to tell you not to ask me all that. Oh.
Everybody, welcome aboard. What do you want to do today?
We're
going to get a beautiful day here in Providence. It's wonder. It's going to start snowing again tomorrow. I don't think it's going to snow. Hey, my name is Tom, and you're currently on board the Providence River Boat Company. A couple quick things to go over before we head off on our tour today. The first is I'm going to ask everyone to please remain seated during the boat ride. There's a Coast Guard requirement on board our vessels. They want you to stay in your seats. It's not because they think you're going to fall into the river. They think you're going to fall down on the deck and get hurt. Small boats are really strange ways. If any of you adults decide that you would like to wear a life jacket today for any reason at all, they're in the bench seats you're sitting on. There are white hatches on both sides. We can open those up and take them out. They're bright orange. They go over your head. They have one strap that goes around your body. They're quite fetching. And they're easy to put on. I'll give you a hand on that if you'd like. If anyone sees a fire on the vessel, there's a big fire extinguisher here. Even larger one inside the console by my feet. We use this to fight heat fires. And if anyone does actually end up in the river, whether that is accidental or on purpose, there's a big orange life ring here. I would throw that to the person in the water, and then we're all going to drag them back out of the boat as soon as we can. I don't expect to use any of that equipment today, folks. We practice with it all the time. But not with customers in 34 years. Let's keep it that way, okay? In all seriousness, if anything abnormal happens, just stay seated and clean. I'll tell you exactly what to do, okay? So again, welcome aboard. We are currently in the Providence River. This thing is water floating in. We're gonna head north into downtown for a tour through the city, then we'll come back down here behind me to the harbor for a little bit before we come back to our docks. I'm gonna talk about a few things along the way. If you have any questions, anything I don't talk about or mention, you wanna ask me something, just put your hand up for a bit. And when I have a chance, I will attempt to answer your question. I'm gonna warn you ahead of time, if I don't know the answer, I'm probably gonna make something up. We call that Tour Guide 101 or Fatherhood. The first thing we're talking about today is this little gray bridge in front of us with the flags on it. This is called the Crawford Street Bridge, and it's the second structure to bear that name to exist over the river in Providence. The original Crawford Street Bridge was completed by the city in the mid-1920s, and at one time was described as the widest bridge in the world. It's only as long from bank to bank as the bridge you see here. It was a little more than a quarter-mile wide. At the time, the city had decided that the river is flowing through downtown Providence and become an eyesore, so they just decked the whole thing over with bridge work right in the middle of downtown, completely covering the water for view, and it sat that way until 1988. In 88, they began to tear that up to build the River Walking Parkway we see here now. These new bridges and walkways were opened and dedicated in 1993. So prior to 88, here north, you could not see water at street level. It was entirely covered. As we come off under Crawford Street, we're now in the heart of Providence River Walk, or Providence River Park, is the actual name of all this. Although I've never heard anyone else ever call it that besides me. A lot of folks locally mistakenly call the whole park Water Place Park. Water Place Park is just the northern end of all this, around basin-like area we turn around with everything. The southern end of the park, so here to our right, is called Memorial Park. It's so named for the large war memorial in the middle, that big granite column with the figure of peace on the top. It's a war memorial. That first went up in the city in 1929 on top of the old Crawford Street Bridge. They built that in the middle of a traffic rotary on top of the bridge work over the river here in the middle of downtown Providence. They tore that all up in 88. They dismantled the monument first. It was put in storage for a number of years, then reassembled here in 1995, and they dedicated the area in front of us as Memorial Park. They have since added a World War II memorial to the southern end of this parcel off to our right, and there's a small Korean War memorial with the flags here on the northern side just off to our left. The large building behind it, the brick structure with the clock tower and the weather vane, is the State of Rhode Island Supreme and Superior Court Complex, built along the hillside here between 1926 and 1930. North of Memorial Park, all the buildings to our right or the eastern side of the river, for the next quarter mile or so, are all part of the Rhode Island School of Design, also known as RISD. It's one of the top fine arts and design schools in the U.S. and the world, and it's based here along the riverfront in downtown Providence. This is also where you begin to see firewood stacked up under the bridges as you travel up and down the river. That might seem strange and confusing. We do not burn the bridges. The fire is here for the event called Water Fire. Water Fire is an installation of artwork put on in Providence by an artist named Barnaby Evans. During that event, they light upwards of 80 fires in the river itself. The next Water Fire is Saturday, September 27th. The next section of the river here in front of us is called the confluence. This is the confluence of three rivers here in the middle of downtown Providence. The river that we've been on so far, the Providence River, begins right here. This is the headwaters of the Providence River, directly in front of us. It flows from here south, Narragansett Bay behind me, about 7 miles in total. It's formed here by two separate rivers that flow down to the north and merge here. The river on the right is Chashik, which in the Narragansett language means where the moose water. The river to the left, that we're all going to travel just a little further up, is called Woonasquatucket, and that's usually translated as where the tide ends. And those are the names of both of these rivers already. When Roger Williams came here and founded Providence, in 1636, the native Narragansett people who lived here called them by those names already. They called the Providence River the Great Salt River. I can't pronounce it in their language, so it's creation. They named it the Providence River in honor of the settlement here, Roger Williams' scope of finding this place and true divine providence. He was a minister who tried to settle the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He had a falling out with the church, but eventually he was forced to flee Massachusetts. He traveled south here, he started his own settlement, Providence Plantations. He described Providence as a shelter for persons distressed of conscience. I have often found myself distressed of conscience. What that meant for Roger Williams was that when he heard something he disagreed with, well, he wasn't going to keep his mouth shut about it. He was outspoken. The church wasn't very fond of that, especially when he was talking about that.
Johnny at that.
basin-like section of the river we've entered now is Waterplace Park itself. This is the northern end of the Riverwalk and the focal point of the downtown waterfront park system in Providence. When they built and designed this space, they made it round here like this for a very specific reason. They're paying homage here to the original Salt Cove, which was the centerpiece of downtown Providence for many, many years. When Roger Williams and his small group of followers first showed up here in 1636, they settled up on the big hills off to our east, what we call College Hill in Providence. More specifically, the area along the hillside, now known as Benefit Street. The first homes were built along the hill where Benefit Street runs now, and they all faced west, towards the rivers. This area, where downtown Providence is all around us, especially the area to our south, behind me, this was all a great big salt marsh, a big tidal estuary, two rivers flowing down from the north, the tide pushing it out from the south towards the bay. Try to imagine for a minute while we sit here, more than 200 acres of salty water surrounded by swampy marsh. Over the years, as they built and developed this area into a city, they began to fill in around the edges of all that swampy marshland, little by little, until 200 years later, by 1840, all that was left down here was a big round basin, very similar to the one we're in right now. Except that one was larger than this, 7 or 8 times bigger. And the city referred to that area as the Cove. The Cove was surrounded with a large public park and walkway, just like this one is. They called that park the Promenade. There's actually a Promenade Street just west of here, on the other side of the mall. That's all that's left of the city. The original Promenade is Promenade Street. The Promenade and the Cove were the centerpiece of downtown. They built the first train station in Providence, right along the banks of the Cove. They built the Rhode Island State House, the Capitol building, to our north on Smith Hill. To overlook the Cove, this area was the focal point of the city. By about 1880, though, the rivers that flow through downtown had become increasingly polluted through industrialization and urbanization of the surrounding area. They dumped all the refuse they had into the waterways, unfortunately. And the city decided, I don't think we want the cove in the downtown. I bet it was disgusting to look at it. So they decided they would fill it all in. At the time, there was another large hill in the city called Weybosset Hill. It still existed today, maybe off to our south in downtown, where Weybosset Street crosses Providence now. They tore down Weybosset Hill. They took all that material, all the dirt and the earth from the hill, dumped into the cove and filled it. That project took more than 8 years. When they were done, all that was left here was a narrow spillway for the river to flow. About as wide as that little area there between us and the wall, that small section of the river. And then in 1890, they decked this space over with bridge work and they ran a railroad yard through here. That's how it sat for almost 100 years, 1890 to 1988. The rail lines in the city of Providence all ran right through the space we're sitting in right now, with the river hidden underneath the entire time. That was the beginning of that widest bridge in the world that I talked about earlier, Crawford Street. They started here in the 1890s, just kept working their way through downtown every once in a while, until they finished where the current Crawford Street Bridge is in the mid-1920s, about 1920. We have a decent view of the State House to our north here. That large white dome building straight up the stairs in front of us is the capital, the State House for Rhode Island. One of the small ironies of its location up there on Smith Hill is that they intended for that building to overlook the cove as it gazed upon the city. However, by the time the state finished building it in 1904, the cove had already been filled in and the State House was overlooking a rail yard. The golden fellow on top of the dome up there is called the Independent Man, and he is Rhode Island's symbol of independence. Rhode Island was the first colony to declare its independence from England 2 months before the other 12 on May 4th, 1776, not July 4th. And we were the last ones to ratify the Constitution and join the United States more than 2 years after the other 12 already done so. And that building is made of white Georgian marble, state of Georgia. The entire structure, even that big dome, that is the 4th largest self-supporting masonry dome in the world. They have an excellent tour of the State House if you're into such things, like I do. It is only available during the week, during normal state business hours, no weekends up there, unfortunately. I'm told that's a union issue. And if you're going to be in the city tomorrow night, they are going to do a small partial water fryer just here in this round circle around us. It'll start about 20 minutes after sunset. I suspect it'll only be about 2 hours. And accordingly,
Providence, Rhode Island. So Rhode Island.
20 minutes after sunset. It might last 2 hours tomorrow. I can't.
Cái pe miền bồn tiền đấy cái ở lư chia cho vào xa lòng tiền đó được xăng cái chặt xăng hay đơn sung tại vì khi mua mặt hàng tao cho vào xa cái ngày bồn tiền này rồi nữa.
And everyone see these 2 white steeples here in front of us? The more modern building on the right, the large brick building with the white steeple on the top, is the former Providence, Washington Insurance Company. That was built in 1948. It's now owned by the Rhode Island School Design. They have offices reformed here by Roger Williams himself in 1638, after he left the Puritans behind for good. The current building back there that we're looking at now, though, only dates to 1775. That is the third meeting house for the First Baptist Church. When they built that in 1774 and 75, the Revolution had, for all intents and purposes, already begun. The British were already blockading Newport Harbor to our south and Boston Harbor to our north. All the unemployed ship's carpenters in southern New England descended upon Providence to build that church. It was the only large construction work available to them. That steeple was up and completed in 3 days. Try and ask the contractor to do that now and see how hard they're it is. The lower church body took a year. If you look to the right-hand side of the boat here on the wall, you'll see a list of brass dates over here with some lines underneath. The top one is 1938, the second one 1954, the third one 1815. The lines represent the hurricane tide levels here in downtown Providence in those years. In 1938 and 1954, two major hurricanes struck Rhode Island. In 38, virtually no weather service, no weather radar, no Al Roker in the morning, no Jim Cantori on cable TV. They had very little warning here that storm was coming at all. A town in Long Island, New York, West Hampton, New York, called the state of Rhode Island 4 hours before that storm hit Providence. So 4 hours notice for a Category 3 hurricane. That's 120-mile-an-hour winds. The eye of that storm hit southern Rhode Island directly, and the storm surge, all the seawater pushed by the hurricane, that all came straight up Narragansett Bay and into the city of Providence. And it struck at 38 at high tide. Now we're currently just past high tide. The water's already started dropping off. It's high about 20 minutes past 3 today. So there's always fresh water flowing down the rivers towards the ocean, towards south, and then the tide pushes down here towards the east. Just starting to go out right now. At the bottom of that list, right above the water, there's a line marked ST. That stands for spring tide. That is the average high tide height for the city. Sometimes the water level here springs up above that line, sometimes below it. Today's tide was 2 or 3 inches above that line, so not much more than an average. We'll call it a little more than a 5-foot tide. In September of 38, that storm put an additional 17.5 feet of seawater above spring tide into downtown Providence, flooding this whole area all around us, causing massive physical damage to the city and the surrounding parts of Rhode Island, and unfortunately, killing more than 400 people statewide. It was a major disaster at the time. They didn't name hurricanes in the 30s, but they call that storm the Long Island Express. The second line, 1954, that's Hurricane Carol. They had established the National Weather Service fully during World War II, so by the 50s, they were tracking and naming the storms. They had a much better idea that Carol was on the way. They couldn't stop it any more than we stop one now, so they evacuated. They told people to leave the city and other low-lying areas of Rhode Island near the water. Carol also struck at high tide in August of 54. It pushed 16 feet of seawater into Providence, again flooding this whole area and causing massive damage, although only one recorded death in the city of 54, about 15 statewide. That little bit of notice makes a huge difference if people pay attention. It was after those back-to-back events in the modern era that they decided to design and build the Hurricane Barrier. It's a large dam-like structure by the harbor that I'll talk about much later. The third line, 1815. That's called the Great New England Gale of 1815. It's a massive storm written about all over southern New England. It's estimated the Great Gale may have killed between 3,000 and 6,000 New Englanders in its day. It was also, more than likely, a hurricane. It happened in October that year. We know now that October is still hurricane season. If you read about the gale, it sounds a lot like a hurricane. Tidal surge, heavy winds, heavy rains, flooding. In 1815, though, they had no idea what a hurricane was. It was a massive storm. What they called the gale. Here in downtown Providence in 1815, the vast majority of the buildings downtown at that point in time were simple colonial-built structures made out of wood or bricks or stones. The Great Gale flattened downtown Providence. They had to rebuild this whole area after that. That's what they call a once in a 100-year tide. One over the sea level is an average of 100 years. There's one building here in downtown Providence along the river that survived the Great Gale of 1815 that still existed before that. It's the only structure of that age at this level of the city. There's plenty of older buildings in the hills nearby to our east. It's the three-story brick building to our left here with the white colonial trim. The clock in its peak. That building is called Market Square, or sometimes Market House. That was built by the city in 1773 as a center for business and trade. Very similar in form and function to Boston's Faneuil Hall Market Building. It even looks like a mini group of things. That building survived the Great Gale because those first floor windows, arched windows, were on the bottom of the street level. In 1815, there were no windows there. Just open archways in the market area of the building. It survived, much like one of those modern beach houses you see up on pilings and stilts. The water can flow in there and flow back out and not actually knock the whole thing over. Most certainly at that point in time, an accidental feature, but a very lucky one. That is also owned by the Rhode Island School of Design now. They bought that from the city of Providence in 1950. But the building itself is on the National Register of Historic Places. I am told that Market Square is an unpopular place to work at RISD. There's no air conditioning. That building also served all the functions of City Hall until the current City Hall was completed in 1878. Everyone see the small gray building here in front of us with a dome on its roof? It's only 3 or 4 stories tall. They're kind of tucked into the city. That's called the Customs House. That is the original U.S. Customs building for the Port of Providence. They built that there in 1855 at the end of what was then called Long Wharf. In the 1850s, the Port of Providence was still all downtown, all around us. This was all wharfs and warehousing. There would have been tall ships lined up here right in the middle of the city, loading and unloading cargo. The glass-stained cupola on top of the dome of the Customs House was a room, a place where they could station a customs agent. And they would look out into the bay to our south to see if ships were sailing in. No phones or radios in the 1850s. Once they arrived, they'd send somebody out here and they would tax them on their cargo, tariffs. That's how the U.S. government made almost all of its revenue until shortly after the Civil War. Think about the skyline of Providence here in front of us, though. When they built the Customs House, that was the tallest structure downtown, a towering lookout point, which you can see for miles out into Narragansett Bay. You can't even see the modern harbor to our south at the top of the old Customs House any longer. It's been swallowed up by the city all around it. That was replaced in 1898 with the current federal courthouse of the state of Rhode Island, which is over in Kennedy Plaza. The mural to the left is a relatively new feature here in the city. I'm going to move so you can see that a little better. Bear with me. in 2018 by a local arts group in Providence known as the Avenue Concept, and they have public art all over the city, hundreds of pieces. This particular installation is called Still Here. That is a Narragansett woman up there, a living, breathing one from the area who composed that painting. The Narragansett people have a 12,000-year history in this area. They settled here at the end of the last ice age. And they are very much still here. And they painted that whole mural in less than a week. Ryan, I'll give you $20 to throw them in the river.
Tao khai mấy cái này có phải đa sốc cái áp đó. Đa sốc cái áp.
Here in front of us, we have the new Providence River pedestrian and bicycle bridge. This was built here by the state of Rhode Island to connect the southern ends of the river walkway here in this location. They built this bridge on those granite block footings in the river, and those were already here. The footings are all that's left from the original Interstate 195 Providence River Bridge. The original 6-lane 195 highway used to cut to the middle of downtown, cross the river right here above us, and then head off to our east towards southern Massachusetts and Cape Cod. It was built in the late 1950s, early 1960s. The bridge that was here, though, was in poor condition. It could no longer be repaired, had to be replaced. Rather than do that in the middle of the city again, they built a new bridge and highway with a harbor to our south. We'll take a look at that shortly. And then the old one was torn down in 2010, tearing down the old bridge and highway, also freed up more than 40 acres of real estate in Providence for development opportunities. The large brick building coming up on the western bank in front of us is known to most locals in Providence as the Dynamo House. This was originally a coal-fired power plant known as the South Street Station. It first came online in the city in 1918, owned and operated by the Narragansett Electric Company. South Street was decommissioned and shut down in 1995, and the building sat here empty and abandoned for almost 20 years. There were lots of ideas of what they could do to save and reuse South Street, but nothing worked out until 2014. It was announced that the University of Rhode Island and Rhode Island College would be merging their separate nursing school programs into one physical location here. They have since converted the majority of this into the Rhode Island Nursing Education Center, RINEC. There's 2 floors of offices on the top there that are occupied by Brown University. Brown does not have a nursing school, but their own medical school is almost directly across the street from here to our west, just beyond the big parking garage.
What's the new construction next?
Labs for Brown.
Okay. That's cool.
hurricane barrier. This is what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came up with as a solution to the hurricane flooding of 1938 and 1954 to protect downtown Providence from future hurricane tidal surge. They started building this project in 1960. They finished in 1966. The cost at that time, $16 million. I cannot imagine what that would be today if they had to start over, probably $200 million or more. Although large and impressive in the river in front of us, this actually stretches more than 3,000 feet in total. It starts to our west at high ground near the Allens Avenue entrance into the modern port. Comes east of the land of the river, through the river in front of us, then east again to our left, across Fox Point, over towards Indian Point, roughly in parallel with the new highway up there. And there are gates in the structure, the 3 gates in the river in front of us, which is very obvious, of course, but also gates on land over all the streets and openings. And all of those get closed in the event of an approaching storm, and then the whole thing acts like a big dam or a levee to stop that surge of ocean water from coming in here when a storm approaches. It rains a lot during a hurricane. If you've been in one before, I bet you noticed that part. And all the rainwater that lands on the city and north of the city drains into the rivers. And the rivers can't be shut off. They just keep flowing on down here. So if you turn this into a big dam to stop the surge of ocean water getting pushed in, you've trapped all the river water from flowing out. And eventually it would back up against this like a real dam and then flood Providence anyways. Well, the Army Corps is pretty sharp. We knew that was part of the challenge here. So a major component of the barrier is this little brick building straight in front of us. That's a pumping station. There are 5 pumps in there that they turn on once the gates are closed, and then they pump the river over the barrier into the harbor faster than it flows naturally. Each pump can move more than 600,000 gallons of water every minute. That's more than 3 million gallons a minute when all 5 are running together. They were built in the 60s. They were the largest pumps ever constructed at that point. And it's quite effective. They've used this for a number of storms over the years, most recently Superstorm Sandy. The Army Corps comes here to test the facility much more often than that. They are concerned for the age and design of this, that if they don't keep the gates in the river in front of us moving all the time, that they may seize in place and get stuck. So about once a month, they come here and they exercise the gates. They lower these all the way down, and they crank them all the way back up. It takes 30 minutes to lower the doors into position fully beneath gravity, and then slowly ease them down. It takes 2 hours to crank them back up. Each door weighs 112,000 pounds. Home heating oil. Providence is the #1 source for home heating oil in New England. There are 4 fuel oil terminals in the port. There's even a pipeline from here that goes all the way to Springfield, Massachusetts, delivering fuel oil to Western and Northern New England. That red tanker to our left is unloading home heating oil in the capital city right now. As part of the fuel oil business, Diesel fuels, kerosenes, aviation gasolines, automobile gasolines, asphalt. Road salts, they salt the streets in the winter in New England. It's really nice to salt in Providence. And at Quonset, the old Navy base just south of here where they built the bridge, they bring in Volkswagens, Audis, Porsches, Bentleys, and Subarus. We have one major export from the port, and that is scrap steel. There are two companies that bring scrap here and then ship it overseas, where it's eventually melted down and turned into brand new steel. And I think we just buy a lot of them like right back. The newest addition to the port area are those large power generating wind turbines to our south. Those were installed here by the Narragansett Bay Commission. They are located above the Fields Point wastewater treatment facility. They were built to help offset increasing electrical expense associated with sewage treatment in the city of Providence. I own a home here in the city. I have not seen my sewer bills go down. They never go down. It's ridiculous. These large red and black boats who are east here at Fox Point are tugboats owned by a company called McAllister Towing. McAllister is a large family-owned and operated company based out of New York Harbor. The McAllisters founded that company in 1864. They still own and operate it as a family. They have tugboats like these up and down the East Coast from Portland, Maine, all the way to Puerto Rico. McAllister tugs in Providence are big enough to go anywhere. Sometimes they do. There's usually 6 or 8 of them here, so a couple are out working right now. They're mainly here to help larger vessels like that big tanker in and out of the port as they arrive and depart. Manchester's even older. This facility first came online in the city in 1904. Its original purpose was to create and distribute direct current, DC power. At the time, the city's electric streetcar system, which is long gone now. The building all the way to the right, except for the fact since it's the original 1904 building. In 1906, the property was purchased by a company called Narragansett Electric and then converted and upgraded to power the city and the surrounding area by burning coal, which they did here continuously until 1990. Began to shut it down. That middle 10-story rectangular building based in Narragansett Electric's takeover. In 1992, Narragansett Electric announced that they would be modernizing Manchester Street. They began adding 3 natural gas turbines to our left here on the southern portion of the property. They also rebuilt the original steam turbine system in the north. When they did all that work here in the 90s, they spent a tremendous amount of money and time to make the new portions of the power plant reflect the architecture of the old. So although it looks vintage, it is a much more modern facility. We're putting natural gas in there right now. This makes electricity for nearly 400,000 homes. Narragansett Electric no longer exists as a company. It's still by a group out of Virginia called Dominion. Although I know it's for sale, if anyone ever buy a power plant. Dominion claims that Manchester Street is the most photographed power plant in the United States. That is an actual claim by Dominion of Massachusetts. It is rather handsome for an industrial power plant, especially at night. It's all lit up, very popular. Artists and photographers. And you might have even seen it before yourself, not even realized it. If you've ever seen the movie There's Something About Mary by the Farrelly brothers, the first half of that film was shot here in Providence. There's 2 scenes in that movie that take place in the Texas Hospital floor east. The power plant's in the background the entire time. The Farrelly brothers grew up in Cumberland, Maryland. bridge is called the Point Street Bridge. It was built in 1927 by the Boston Bridge Works Company. At the time, this was a swing bridge. This entire center section used to turn. It would rotate on the round turntable there in the middle and swing out over what's left of this rotting wooden pier, and that would create openings on both sides so that ships would transit in and out of the upper harbor and downtown Providence area. They stopped using this portion of the river and harbor commercially in 1960 once they began construction on the hurricane barrier, and that bridge hasn't turned since. The city modernized this in the late 1990s. They shut it down for a couple of years. They rebuilt it. Unfortunately, at that time, they sealed it all shut. It will never turn again. This is the last of 3 of these that existed in Providence together at one point in time. The wooden pier in the middle that's all rotted now was here originally to protect the bridge from ship strike when it was open. So if the ship was passing through here, like we're about to, if it veered off course, it would run into the pier, not the bridge. It's called a sacrificial pier. And you heard me talk about the highway bridge and how they built that off-site and floated it in and dropped it with tide. I bet that sounded like an incredibly modern and efficient way to build a bridge, right? That's how they built this bridge in 1927, the exact same way. They built this center section in a shipyard 3 miles downriver, floated it up here on 2 barges with wrapped. Everything old. The last thing I want to show you here, right that's a pretty young one. It's just changed over from slate to slate color. You can see its neck is pretty white here. That's an alpha level predator for a bird, but I've seen them take fish with cane fishing. There's lots of cane fishing. They're walking along the shoreline with these rocks and stones and barely on land. Talk about today is this large gray church steeple at the top of College Hill in front of us. That is the steeple for the first Unitarian church located at the corner of Benefit and Benevolent Streets. The current meeting house we're looking at right now was completed in 1816. Their claim to fame is that they have the largest bronze bell ever cast by Paul Revere, although King's Baptist Church of Boston claims the same thing. They do have proof that Paul Revere and his sons came to Providence to see the installation in 1868. He would have been 81 at the time. If you're going to explore the hillside here with the historic district of Providence, make sure you stop by the First Unitarian. It's a beautiful building. And they still ring Paul's bell. folks going out for your tour today. I hope you enjoy yourselves. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening here in Providence. I will let you know also there's a little bit of a rain cell in front of us coming in from the west. It's tiny. It should only last maybe 10 minutes, but it will be here in about 10 or 15 minutes. It won't last long at all. We had one earlier today.
Do they do the sunset tour or no? Do they do the sunset tour?
They do sunset tour today.
Oh.
We haven't had one
It's like 7 years.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we could do that.
Give me 20 bucks.
Let's get right. Wait,
Somebody asked about sunset for tomorrow's water fire 7:40, so the place should be done by 7:40. Folks, you're free to stand up and take some mark. We should have stepping out of the dock over here. I'm going to offer you my hand again.
yeah, let's get up. Mong 7 កន្លះបើចង់មើល sunset ខ្ញុំឲ្យដាក់ចូលហើយអូខេvậy điខ្ញុំឲ្យចាំដល់
Step, young man. Thanks, go ahead, sir. Thank you. Step here. Step. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Have a great day. Watch your step. Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Watch your step here, folks.
Cha đó, tập coi đi. Thọt vô sân.
ថតអត់ចាយ
Thọt vô sân. Cho đó. Just there, I'll send to you. Just there. Hey, 1, 2, 2, hold on. 1, 2, 3. Nhầm trai. Yeah, nhầm trai. Got 3 posts. Chậm tí tiện. Hold it. Wait, hold on, 5 seconds. Just son. 1, 2. Go, get that by here. Good. Yeah, go. Cho đi bây giờ. Here. Thank you. Rồi chiên. Bà chiên pi nè, bà pi rồi. Bà khni chran. Rồi chiên. Yeah. Cho việc ai anh ông tu có nó hot anh ốm rồi. The spin only the spin. Còn the spin thì môi. First spin. Thì môi. Yeah. Okay. Nice tree. Wait, trước rồi. Trời, từ có. Rồi đó bước mơ hao.
I don't even know bear anyone like that. Like I was like that.
Yeah.
I don't know when you see trong TikTok ở New York. My station cái một con nào đấy thế.
Yeah. Hả? Ok. Con mũi nè. Tờ lan ở hết. Sekarang sangatan ada ni. Nè, chọt cháo lên đặt khnoh môi ạ. Đặt khnoh môi hai chọt 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 cháo. Nè cái đó. Okay. We don't know drive out? No. Okay, I'll take you 30 minutes. Hey, jump.
Look, man, we listen to you guys. Look what happened.
What happened? Oh yeah. What?
Ô, bán cái kính.
Nè, cha bong à.
Bán rìa.
Bong ta, cha.